Dear friends, dear colleagues, welcome to 11th part of the ICOMOS International Committee of Underwater Cultural Heritage webinars. To have the opening speech, I would like to invite Dr. Christopher Underwood, who is the president of ICOMOS UCH.
Thank you, Hakan, and thanks again for organising number 11 of our series of webinars that seems to be extending perhaps into even 2022. They've proven popular and extremely diverse. Today is a very special occasion for me to welcome my wife, Dr. Dolores Elkin, more often known to her friends and colleagues as Lolly. She's an Argentinian archaeologist with a tenured research position at the country's National Council for Scientific and Technical Research, better known as CONICET. She is based at the National Institute of Anthropology, which is part of the Ministry of Culture, where she is the director of the Underwater Archaeology Programme since its creation in 1995. She is also the current Vice President, past President, of the 2001 UNESCO Convention Scientific and Technical Advisory Body, also known as STAB. She is a professor at the University of Buenos Aires, contributing to the development speciality both at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. But she has also conducted many outreach initiatives within the sport diving community and the general public, and is currently a board member of the National Monuments Commission. She has been the principal investigator of many research and management projects, most of them involving shipwrecks from the 18th, 19th and 20th centuries, located in Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, which are in the south of the country. Perhaps most well known is her research of the English sloop of war HMS Swift, which sank in 1770, an English warship. She has more than 100 publications, including books, peer-reviewed scientific papers, and book chapters and publications for the general public. She has organised and participated in many national and international scientific meetings and is affiliated with several organisations, including ICOMOS UCH. She holds a professional scientific diving licence from the country's National Coast Guard Agency, and she has also received a number of national and international awards in recognition of her work. And may I add, she is a pioneer in underwater cultural heritage in Argentina. Lolly, over to you. We're all looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. And hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. Nice to see so many friendly faces, and I appreciate for all of you being here with me today. And I'm going to share my screen and just get on with the presentation. I assume you can see it.
We need that better. Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, well, as the title of my presentation states, I'm going to talk about our work at the National Institute of Anthropology with our team, the Underwater Archaeology Program, or PROAS. And I will try to provide an overview of many activities that we conduct with a focus on research and management. And maybe, Chris, I ask you to mute yourself so we don't have interference problems. Thank you. And I want to start with this photograph of our dear, very dear Mexican colleague and friend, Pilar Luna Reguerena, because she played a key role in the development of underwater archaeology in Argentina, my country. I was already thinking of starting with a program on underwater archaeology, but I didn't have any experience in diving, in historical archaeology, in shipwrecks. I was working on land, high altitude, desert archaeology by then. And I met this wonderful woman, and I thought, well, if she could do what she did in Mexico, maybe I can do something similar in my country. So this is a tribute to her. As you know, she left us last year. Okay, our program. It was created in 1995, so we're just on our 25th year anniversary. And like many programs probably in your respective countries as well, we started by combining archaeology and diving. To my knowledge, at that time, there were no archaeologists who dived in Argentina. And so I started putting together a team with people like myself who were beginning to learn to dive, but who already had a degree in archaeology, but also students of archaeology who maybe had some experience in diving. And of course, people from other disciplines or specialties like marine biology, professional diving, conservation, history, etc. But we wanted archaeology to be the center of the program. We soon realized that it was important to conduct different, let's say, lines of activities simultaneously, which are the ones you can see on the screen. Legislation was crucial back then because we didn't have any law that protected UCH in our country. Archaeological research was essential because in the team there were people like myself, and I happened to be responsible for the entire team, who had to work in research more than anything. Like Chris said, I am employed by the National Research Council, and I have to devote 100% of my time to research. So the other activities, I do them because I think they're important, but I'm not paid for that. I also wanted archaeology to get a leading role in the program, aside from my own personal situation. Management, of course, was very important as well. Dissemination to let people know what all this was about, because UCH back in 1995 was only associated to treasure from shipwrecks. And of course, capacity building, not just for ourselves, but like I said, some of us had to learn to dive at the beginning, for example, and learn about UCH, but also we hope that with time we would be able to train or help in the capacity building for others who would follow us. So starting with legislation, which like I said was essential at that time, a landmark took place in year 2003 when National Law 25743 was passed. After many years of us interacting with politicians, legislators, heritage managers, etc., finally, this law in this article says that it includes within the concept of archaeological heritage elements that are submerged in jurisdictional waters, as you can read in the underlined bit, and also not just from pre-Columbian times, but until historic recent times. This was pretty new also because the previous law we had for archaeological heritage, A, was only applied to land archaeology, and B, was restricted to prehistoric or pre-Hispanic archaeology. So these two components of the new law were fantastic. And by the way, recent historic times in this law means until 100 years ago. You will soon note the alignment with the UNESCO Convention, which also has a threshold for 100 years to consider, in the case of UNESCO Convention, UCH. And talking of that, at an international level, we had a considerable involvement in the development and promotion of the UNESCO 2001 Convention. My first participation was in 1999 when, together with my boss, the director of the National Institute of Anthropology, we attended a meeting in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic in one of the stages of the drafting of the UNESCO Convention. And then, of course, I was able to interact with many other people who are involved in the promotion of the convention, including Pilar Luna, for sure, and Tony Carrell and Peggy. I've seen Peggy here in the audience. Peggy and Tony are, of course, members of ICUCH, like was Pilar, and the four of us were known as Chicas Radicales, or radical girls, because we really fought for the convention and we continue to do so. As you also know, I'm a member of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Body to the Convention. So that takes up part of my activities. Okay, moving on to research and more, because I'm going to mention some things that are related to our research projects. Like I said, these are very important components of our program. And in the map, you can see the locations in which we have been conducting projects throughout these 25 years. Our headquarters are located in Buenos Aires City. But as you can see, we've been mostly working along the coast of the South Atlantic Ocean. And today I'm going to mention two projects which I wanted to highlight because they are projects in which I have been involved considerably as a principal investigator. One is the HMS Swift project in Puerto Deseado, which Chris already mentioned briefly in his introduction, and the other one has to do with a Spanish 18th century frigate merchant vessel in the Atlantic coast of Tierra del Fuego. So regarding the first one, as it was said already, HMS Swift was lost in 1770, and it was a British sloop of war, which was part of the British fleet in Malvinas Islands, better known as Falkland Islands in the English-speaking community. And it sank in the place that you can see here in this map. This is the town of Puerto Deseado. We are looking towards the Atlantic Ocean, which is over here. So we're looking east. And the site is more or less over here. In the images on the right, you can see our pontoon or working platform in one of the, or more of the field seasons. You can see it is pretty much in the harbor of Puerto Deseado. And it is a very interesting site, which we excavated basically between 2002, 2010. By the way, we didn't discover the site. The site had been discovered by local divers back in the early 1980s. And, but the province of Santa Cruz wanted our team, as soon as it was formed, to take up the archaeological research in the site. So this image shows the site plan, of course, and in red, the areas in which we conducted excavation, archaeological excavations. The site has quite poor visibility. It's about a meter and a half. The water is, of course, quite cold in the South Atlantic, so we have to wear dry suits for our work. And it is a very rich but very complex archaeological context. Here is just one example of 1 square meter of one of the archaeological levels of the site, in which you can see the artifacts that are contained within other artifacts, for example, and of course a lot of materials that are part of the ship's structure. By the way, we estimate that about 65–70% of the hull is preserved, of course, wooden hull. And here's an example of some furniture pieces that were found in the stern, in the area occupied by the officers. You can see in this image the excavation of one of the shelves that belonged to this furniture piece, like a cupboard that had some shelves with special holes to contain and keep in place elements such as ceramic or porcelain bowls. We also were able to study topics such as the hierarchies amongst the crew, being able to tell that the officers used elements of high quality as expected, such as Chinese porcelain, but also good quality English earthenware. They also used good quality metal objects. The excellent preservation of the site allowed us to study topics that have to do with organic remains, such as what did people eat on board. And we found the elements that you can see here on the screen that includes condiments and fruit and things like penguin eggs, which of course are elements that would never be mentioned in the historical documents amongst the Admiralty documents regarding the rations, because these are things that were collected locally. In Patagonia, and of course in Antarctica, but also in continental Patagonia and in the archipelagos, it's possible to collect penguin eggs in some seasons. And of course, this provides an additional, well, it enriches the diet for sure. So we were particularly eager on the penguin eggs. This is an egg of king penguin. We also addressed some technological issues. For example, are the artifacts representative of the technology of the time? Are they standard? Are they special? And for example, in the case of glass or the glass artifacts, we could tell that they are quite, let's say, quite characteristic of the 18th century, and they have a considerable variety in quality. Regarding metal, this was an interesting find, which is that some of the composition, the chemical composition of coins, which were supposed to be pure copper, were instead made of an alloy, reducing the amount of copper. And not only that, but some of them were also made with molds instead of being struck as they were supposed to be. So they were counterfeit. And also we were able to note some evidence of repairs like welding in some objects, like the candle holder you can see on the right. At some point, a very interesting chest, a small chest, was found full of vials and other containers like the ones you see in this image, which allowed to address the topic of health. We are pretty sure these belong to the surgeon on board, and some chemical analysis to the contents allowed to identify the use of mercury in the form of mercurious chloride or in pure form. And as you probably know, mercury at the time was used to treat venereal diseases, but of course it not only did not cure venereal diseases, but it could cause severe neurological damage to the person. So clearly at the time of the SWIFT, they were still using mercury. We also found, it was possible to identify this substance called anthraquinone, which is used for treating things like gum or skin diseases or injuries, for example, burns. So this is an very interesting strand of research, in my opinion, and the fact that the vials were found in many cases with stoppers is allowing this chemical analysis of the content. We've also addressed the topic of site formation processes at the site. The person in the image is Dr. Ricardo Bastida, marine biologist who participated in the project pretty much throughout the whole stages of research, and he led the research strand on site formation processes, at least in terms of biology. And as you can see, we found wooden elements severely attacked by marine wood borers, which was a bit of a surprise because the general idea is that in cold waters they are not so active, but clearly this was the case, and we think this happened after the ship sank, because the attack was found in, I don't know the word in English for the upper part of the ship's structure that was not underwater, for example, when the ship was in the Caribbean or in warmer waters. There was a very unexpected find in the Swift, which was a human skeleton that was not only unexpected but interesting because it allowed to do many things from the research point of view, to conduct some bioanthropological studies, also in association with the accessories and pieces of garment that were associated to the skeleton, such as the buttons, buckles, or shoes that you can see on the right of the image. And what we know so far about this skeleton is that it belonged to a male person, a young adult, about 25 years old, 1.67 meters in height, probably right-handed, with good bone and dental health. And this is interesting, when he died, he was wearing a red woolen jacket. This was able to be known because there were traces of red wool attached to some of the bones, like the scapula. And that implied that the person was wearing a military uniform at the time of death. In turn, that implied he was a Marine. He was, because it had a red jacket. So we know that he has to be one of two persons who were the two Marines who died in the accident, Robert Ruskert or John Ballard. By the way, the whole crew were 91 people and 3 persons died, including 2 Marines. So we know he's one of these two. However, when DNA was extracted from the skeleton, it was, as it's usually the case with ancient DNA, it was mitochondrial DNA. As you probably know, this implies that it's very difficult to identify the individual because mitochondrial DNA is transmitted through the line of the females along the genealogy. So if you want to go back all the generations to 1770, you would have to identify women who were related to this person. And also the surnames of women tend to be lost with the marriages. So it's difficult to find if you start looking for the last name Rusker or the last name Ballard. So I'm not saying it's impossible to identify the person, but it's challenging. It's something, it's one of the things that is pending that we would like to do at some point, to attempt to identify the person. In the meantime, this young man is buried in the city of Buenos Aires in the so-called British Cemetery. It's actually a sector, a British sector within one of the main cemeteries in the city. And this was a very special ceremony because it was conducted by, with the presence of representatives from the Argentinian Navy and the British Navy. And the ceremony was in English and Spanish. So it was pretty moving, pretty rewarding too. A word on conservation. This, of course, is a challenge for the HMS Swift and for every example of UCH, but given the amount of organic remains that are found in this site, it is, I would say, particularly demanding. Nonetheless, the local museum in Puerto Deseado, which is a Museo Brosowski, is in charge of the conservation of all the collection, conservation, curation, and exhibition of all the collection. And these are just some examples of some organic materials. Talking of the Brosowski Museum, it has been completely refurbished right before the pandemic, December 2019. And it has a new exhibition, and well, now that the lockdown is finishing or slowly opening up, it's doing quite well. And I checked in Wikipedia yesterday, and I found this, which is, it's nice being somebody who has participated in all the archaeological research, which is it says that it's the only museum of underwater archaeology and conservation in Argentina, and it's dedicated mainly to the Swift sloop. So it's really nice to have a museum of this sort in our country. Of course, we published quite a lot on the Swift. These are some examples. The main publication is the image in the center. It's a book called The Shipwreck of HMS Swift, 1770, Maritime Archaeology in Patagonia. It is in Spanish, but we hope to have an edition in English in the near future. And we also published in places like the IJNA, and hopefully next year there will be an article for post-medieval archaeology as well. And we also have publications more for the general public, like brochures or things like the one shown here on the left, which is called In Patagonia. There have also been videos, a film, a TV program on the Swift, and even a novel inspired on the wreck. The novel called The Sunken Secret is it's a thriller. It's a murder novel, and it's doing quite well. So it's nice to see all these outcomes of the Swift. And here's a picture of the core team of the project, which is now in a sort of standby, partly because the museum's facilities cannot take up more artifacts. So we think it would be irresponsible to continue the excavation or extracting more artifacts if there's no capacity in the museum to deal with them. But there are about 700 artifacts already in the collection, which is plenty. So the second project I wanted to talk about today, like I said, is located in Tierra del Fuego. We're moving south on the Atlantic coast of the main island. This is a close-up of the research area. It's a peninsula called Peninsula Mitre, which was part of the Cape Horn route. The ships came through or along this Strait of Le Maire and then turned west into the Pacific, or southwest. This is Staten Island. So this is a Peninsula Mitre, where there are quite a lot of wrecks, at least documented historically. Some we found traces of physically and are part of our archaeological research, but one in which we wanted to focus particularly is this one, the Purísima Concepción. I told you it was a Spanish merchant vessel, a frigate, which was lost in Peninsula Mitre in 1765. It stranded on the coast. And there's a diary, which is the image you see on the left. That's a cover, which is at the National Naval Museum in Madrid, which describes in detail the story of the crew. There were about 300 people, all of them survived and were able to build a new ship and come back to Buenos Aires after 3 months. And during those 3 months in which they stayed in Tierra del Fuego, they interacted with the Aboriginal people, with the local native communities, which, by the way, inhabited the island until, I would say, late 19th century, pretty much. It was the last frontier. And the diary includes fantastic ethnographic descriptions of these people. And also they interacted with them with harmony. So that was also quite exceptional and really, really interesting. It's a highlight of the story, which is quite emblematic for the province of Tierra del Fuego. So we wanted to see if we could find some archaeological evidence for this site. And there was some background, which was this canon found by locals in 1981, which, despite being quite eroded, so not much could be said about it, but it was found in a part of the coast which seemed to coincide with the geographical descriptions provided by the shipwreck survivors in that diary I mentioned earlier. So we tried to figure out which area this was and conducted, like I said, some research looking for archaeological evidence. So there we went. It's quite a journey to get to this part of the island. We normally go on horseback. It is 3 days The journey takes 3 days to get to the place, from the place where the road ends. So the field work is a bit challenging, to say the least, but it's a fantastic, a spectacular part of the world. And it includes crossing rivers and things like that. So quite an expedition. I take the opportunity that I have more time today than normally in an archaeological presentation in a conference. So I show you these images, which I hope you like. So the goals of our project, like I said, was to find some archaeological evidence. And we chose 2 areas, which are the ones indicated with arrows. One was the area where we thought that could be the shipwreck site, because we thought that that cannon could have been found here. And by the way, the cannon has a caliber that matches the cannons that the ship carried on board. And this other area inside, there's a microphone that is on. If it can be muted, that would be appreciated. I was saying the second area is here inside this cove, which is called Caleta Falsa, where we thought the campsite could have been established. The distance between these 2 places is about 3 kilometers, more or less. So we worked on land and underwater. On land, we worked on that plain inside the cove that I just showed you, where the possible campsite could be. By doing some test pits, and we found some ceramic, which is the one shown in this image in the center, which had all the aspect of being part of an olive jar, like typically Spanish, of coarse pottery. But we also found some refined earthenware that was English style, at least, like the images on the right. By the way, this is a very small item. It's like the knob of I don't know what's the word in English for the place where you keep the butter, like a butter plate with a lid. So this was part of the lid. But at least it was typically 18th century. So given that the Purísima Concepción was a merchant vessel, it could have carried on board English ceramics as well. We also worked in the adjacent forest from the plain that I just mentioned, and the forest was the place occupied by the native people. And there were fascinating finds there, which are the ones shown here. An arrowhead made in glass. So with traditional techniques, like let's say for flint knapping, but made in glass, and also glass beads. So clearly this shows a contact, direct or indirect, but contact with European materials. So little by little, the jigsaw of the Purísima Concepción seemed to acquire more and more pieces. In the intertidal zone, remember I said it was where we thought the cannon was found back in the 80s. We found some cannon shot and some other materials like heavily eroded ceramic sherds. These look English, and some that look again like Spanish, more coarse and with green enamel. And some interesting elements such as gems, maybe we can call them, but made of glass, that perhaps were taken by the Spanish people to trade with the native peoples, or perhaps to decorate garments. We don't know really. The ship was going from Cádiz in Spain to Lima in Peru. We also conducted some underwater search right next to that intertidal zone where the artifacts I just showed you were found. For this, we got the help of Michael Criver, who is in the image, and also Joe Hoyt. So our two colleagues from the US came and helped us. This was in 2017. And here you can see the relationship between places. This is Caleta Falsa, the cove. This is where the campsite would have been, more or less. And this would be the intertidal zone where the cannonballs and other things were found. And this blue rectangle is the area where we planned to do some magnetometry searches. For that, we did get a vessel, so we definitely needed some watercraft. So part of the expedition went on horseback, and part with this vessel you can see in the image, which also took the diving gear. The results were successful in terms of the magnetometry because some clear magnetic anomalies were identified, and we believe they correspond to the rest of the cannons. If one or two or even more were on land, to our knowledge is only the one I showed you. The ship, according to the historical documents, carried 20 iron cannons, so there should still be enough at the site. And obviously the cannons were not useful for the shipwreck survivors. The wood and the fittings were much more useful to construct the new ship and leave the area. So we're pretty sure, like I said, that these anomalies correspond to the cannons, but regrettably, the diving did not allow to check them. So we need to do another field work as soon as we can to check that. Okay, just to finish with a few slides, I'm going to mention a couple of examples of management activities aside from the projects I mentioned. One has to do with the constant development of a database of shipwreck sites, but I want to make clear we're talking about potential shipwreck sites for now. This is the image of the Rio de la Plata, the river that divides Argentina from Uruguay. This is about 50 kilometers. There are a lot of wrecks that are documented for the area, but we know that for only a few that there is actual archaeological evidence, but that's something that we do gradually, and not just for this area, but for Patagonia as well. Of course, we try to do activities that disseminate as part of management in a way the concept of UCH. We work with the police, both at a national and international level, like with Interpol, against illicit traffic. Regarding capacity building, I want to start with the course we teach at the University of Buenos Aires, which is something that is an undergraduate seminar on UCH that we were teaching since 2012. And it's on research and management of underwater and coastal archaeological heritage. This year, we were able to do it online, like most of us had to do when teaching. And the positive thing, as we know, is that perhaps more people can attend. In this case, this year we had at least 23 participants, including some from other countries, not just Argentina, so that was good. And through the University of Buenos Aires, there's also a production of dissertations, both licenciatura, which is like a master's, similar to a master's degree, or between a BA and a master's degree. It's 5-year studies and a thesis, and PhD dissertations. So far we have, combining the ones that are completed and the ones that are ongoing on those two levels, we have a total of 15 theses on UCH. So we're really happy for that. We also participate in capacity building in the area of professional development, specifically the UNESCO courses that you're all familiar with. Argentina has participated in 3, one in Campeche, in Mexico in 2010, one in Argentina in 2013, and one that is taking place right now, which is online, and which has 86 students. You can see the chart is like a pie chart with with all the countries. This is for Latin America and the Caribbean. But out of those 86 students, 68 are from Latin America, that is Spanish or Portuguese speaking countries. So you can see the interest, you can see the activity. The field is growing. It's coordinated by Carlos del Cairo from Colombia, by the way. And you can see that Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, Bolivia, to a lesser extent Ecuador, are the countries with the largest number of participants. And we also work on capacity building in terms of the NAS courses. We think it's really important. We've been doing it for almost 20 years now. And we run courses in Buenos Aires and other places. At the moment, they are run by Dr. Guillermo Gutierrez, who is part of our team. He lives in Patagonia, in Puerto Madryn. And we're working closely with the Diving Operators Association in Puerto Madryn, and I want to highlight this, with the National Park Service of Argentina. They are taking the NAS courses with us, and they're involved in other activities. The images you see here are precisely from one of those NAS courses done in a new marine protected area. And it's fantastic to see that the park rangers are learning to dive, learning about UCH, and being active with regard to UCH and helping us for sure. So we're really, really happy with that. Of course, integrating with the natural heritage, nobody discusses that, but it's something that is growing. So to finish, I wanted to share with you what our team is at present and what it looks to be in the future. As you know, in all teams, there people come and go, and they are dynamic groups of people. But pretty much the persons you see on the screen are the ones who are quite active these days. Architect Christian Murray and Dr. Monica Grosso have been part of the team since the beginning. Well, Chris joined the team in 2004. Dr. Guillermo Gutierrez is the one I mentioned, who lives in Puerto Madryn in Patagonia. Julieta Freire is a young archaeologist who's got a master's degree from Cadiz and who Hakan knows well because she did an internship. She spent some time in Turkey. And in fact, I think this photo is from there. There's a conservator Mariam Pousa. She lives in Ushuaia in Tierra del Fuego, and she can only join our projects periodically or intermittently, but it's good to have her. She's fantastic. Uriel Sokolovich is in charge of film production, like all the TV programs and the films that were done regarding our projects. And Daniela de Os is interested in studying early sites, let's say prehistoric submerged sites. So it's fantastic to see also young people in the team that will hopefully, or I would say surely, continue to develop UCH in my country. With that, I conclude. So thank you very, very much for your attention. Muchas gracias. There's my email address if you want to write to me. And of course, I'm open to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much for this amazing presentation, Loli. It was very nice. And really, one day I really want to come there with the horse riding to see this beautiful region.
I thought you were going to say diving. No, horse riding.
Yeah, diving too, of course. If there is a question, they can.
I'm looking. All I'm saying is congratulations, Loli, for a great presentation. I don't see any questions. I noted Hakan's request to come and join the horse riding. I'll if you do, and that would be wonderful if you could. I'm going to ask you: did you enjoy 3.5 days on a horse? That tends to sort out people. Oh, Marc-Andre has asked a question. What was the impact on your team from COVID?
Thank you, Marc-Andre. Nice to see you here. Well, I think the impact on our team was like probably for all, if not most of us, the frustration of not being able to do any field work. I think we all realized how important it is, a fieldwork component. We took advantage of the lockdown and COVID for writing and teaching online and all of that, and we're all exhausted of having done that intensively. But we miss going to the field, we miss diving. And in some people in our team, the impact was higher because they, well, I'll include myself. We had relatives with COVID, hospitalized. Some people got a bit low for all the situation and the uncertainty. By the way, many of us cannot yet travel to Europe or to the US, for example, because of the vaccines that we have. Mostly the Sputnik, the Russian vaccine, is the one that was applied in Argentina and other Latin American countries. So we feel a bit trapped. But I would say that's the main thing I can think of. Those are the main things I can think of. And I noticed there were other questions.
Yeah, I've got another question, Lolly. It's from Hans van Tilburg to everyone. What were the obstacles to diving on the potential cannon site? And then later he says, was it a lack of compressed air, too deep for breath hold?
Thank you, Hans. No, it's actually very shallow because the original vessel, the Purísima Concepción, stranded. So even with high tide, and there is a considerable tidal range there, probably about 5-6 meters between high and low tide. As I was saying, even with high tide, the place is shallow, but it is the open ocean, and it is, I think, the combination of two things: the hydrometeorological conditions that were not favorable. We wanted to be very cautious because of the place where we were. There was, I mean, the evacuation would have been extremely complicated in case of a problem. So we didn't want to risk anything unless we felt we were covering the safety components enough. We didn't have much time because we were working on land. Like I showed you, there was a land excavation, there was an intertidal search, there was a diving component. And I think now with hindsight that was a mistake. Next time, I think it would be better to just do the underwater work and concentrate on that, and not have to think of the horses, the food, the tent, the cylinders, the boat. It's just too much happening at the same time. So we hope to go back, but it was basically that.
Lolly, there's another question from Diego Carabias from Chile. Which are the main difficulties you face in Argentina in order to create and maintain a competent research team in maritime underwater or maritime oblique underwater archaeology?
Can you say again, please?
So from Diego, which are the main difficulties you face in Argentina in order to create and maintain a competent research team in maritime / underwater archaeology?
Well, I may ask Diego to be more specific, because I would say that we do have a team that is maintained. Now, whether we're competent or not is not for me to say, but I think we do have a team. I think our Achilles heel is the lack of a permanent conservator in the team, because like I said, people like Marian Posa, who is an excellent conservator, she's not part of our team really. She joins specific projects whenever she can and whenever there's money from some organization to pay her. And another obstacle is the fact that, let's say, the senior people in the team, Christian, myself, I mean, I'm talking about people with who are paid for the job, no? because Chris is an honorary researcher, but Christian, myself, and to a lesser extent Monica, will retire in the not too distant future. And unless the next generation gets can get a job and stay, it will be really difficult to continue that. For now, Guillermo and Julieta, they both got, Julieta has a doctoral grant for 5 years. She got it, this is the first year, so she has 4 more years to go. And Guillermo has got a tenure track position in CONICET. So at least those 2 have a job, but the others, I don't know. For example, Daniela, the one I mentioned, who is interested in doing prehistoric submerged archaeology, she doesn't have a grant, she doesn't have a job, she doesn't have a scholarship, and she's thinking of emigrating, of leaving the country. That's another problem. Some people finish the career here and then want to go overseas, either because the salaries are too low or because the social environment is too distressful or whatever. So that is a challenge. But maybe you want to specify more, Diego.
I can't see whether Diego's responded. I guess you've fully answered his questions. Hans has recognized the difficulties of trying to work on the terrestrial and the very shallow offshore environment kind of simultaneously, and I think we've all faced similar problems with different sites. Anyone else wish to make a comment or ask a question of Lolly? It would appear not. Oh, yes, no, Diego has just confirmed the answer was very, very clear, and thank you, Lolly. Thanks, Lolly. I think I, as the sort of extranjero, the foreigner in the team, and having had some experience in, let's say, the United Kingdom and perhaps elsewhere, I'd like to congratulate Lolly and the team for not just staying as the team could have done working on the Swift, but also expanding their areas of interest into management, recognizing the problem with conservation, and different modes, different modalities of transport. We don't ever know whether we're going to be diving, horseback, quad bike, or some other form, even helicopter from time to time. So I think the team has done a fantastic job in expanding its interest into, and particularly with the development of Danny's interest in paleo landscape archaeology, which is growing and growing, and the links with Flinders and other institutions overseas. So the network has grown dramatically, and I think a lot of that is down to Lolly's direction.
One might say that you're a bit biased, but thank you anyway.
Yeah, that may be so. I am a bit biased, but I try to be objective. And I know people who have been and worked with you from outside would say exactly the same as I've just done. So, Hakan, have you got any closing remarks?
Yeah, actually not as closing remarks, but I just want to remind everyone that if some of you couldn't come and listen all the presentation, all the other presentations and also this one is recording, and you can watch them from YouTube ICOMOS account. Thank you very much and have a great day. Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you, Hakan. And just to finish, Marc-Andre chipped in by saying great leadership internationally as well. So, and okay, I think on that note, we can close the seminar, the webinar, and look forward to seeing everybody in a month's time. Thank you, Hakan. And thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you for coming and listening. Bye.